In other news, this is something interesting that happened last week, and if you were not paying attention, it flew right by you. And I'm sure it was purposely done that way. So this brings us to the big lead.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The big C can finally be criticized without fears of being booted from social media. Also, the narrative shift is happening in the way Democrats feel about the vaccine. Democrats are now coming out and attacking Trump for, how do I say this without pissing off YouTube? Adverse events with the vaccine. Yeah, it's Trump's fault now. No, well, let's not get too far ahead here. So, breaking news came out that YouTube had quietly updated their YouTube policy on COVID-19 medical misinformation. And Tim Pool on August 22nd tweeted this. YouTube updates its policies to no longer ban claims that masks do not play a role in preventing spread of COVID. Essentially, you are now allowed to claim masks don't work. Odd. So, I went and found an archive of YouTube's COVID-19 misinformation policy, an old one, and compared it with YouTube's new COVID-19 medical misinformation policy. And wouldn't you know it? Tim Pool was right. So I threw that shit in a text comparer, and let's bring this up. So now I'm not going to list everything that changed, but I will tell you the ones I found significant. So let's bring this up here. So if we scroll down to line 34 and 35, claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the contraction or transmission of COVID-19. And then also right here it says, claims that wearing a mask is dangerous or cause negative physical health effects. So that's no longer there, and you can say that on YouTube now. Why? So let's scroll down to line 42 here. Claims that COVID-19 vaccines do not reduce risk of contracting COVID-19. It's gone. So, does that happen now? Jesus. So let's go down to here to area 61 right here. And it says, social distancing and self-isolation misinformation. Content that disputes the efficacy of local health authorities or WHO's guidance on physical distancing or self-isolation measures to reduce transmission of COVID-19. And as we can see there, gone. Just a blank space there. Now, it's all jumbled up and down because of different formatting because they got rid of stuff, but, you know, it's completely removed. It's no longer there. And then our last ones we'll look at here is if we scroll down to line 89 through 92 and 97. So it says, videos alleging that social distancing and self-isolation are not effective in reducing the spread of the virus. So you can say that self-isolation doesn't work. Claims that wearing a mask cause oxygen levels to drop to dangerous levels. I remember seeing videos of people saying that. And those were getting taken down constantly. I think I reposted one and it got just like, boom, gone. Claims that masks cause lung cancer and brain damage. So is that happening? If they remove that, is that happening? Because that's something that we should know, right? Claims that wearing a mask gives you COVID-19. Okay. Claims that COVID-19 vaccines are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Okay, well, completely removed from the new policy, as you can look over here on your right. And I forgot to tell you guys, the left is the old policy, the right is the new policy. So, what changed, huh? In regards to masks, nothing. Medical doctors were warning about this last year. So, and here's a article here. Medical Journal warns about masks' potential devastating consequences. And there's some words that I'm not going to be able to pronounce here, so bear with me, all right? Last week, YouTube took down an AIER linked video of scientific roundtable on COVID held by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The stated reason concerned some passing comments by the scholars that raised questions about the masking of children. Said a YouTube spokesman, "We removed AIER's video because it included content that contradicts the consensus of local and global health authorities regarding the efficacy of masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The ostensibly objectionable remark came from Harvard professor Martin Koldruff. Quote, "Children should not wear face masks," he said. Quote, "They don't need it for their own protection and they don't need it for protecting other people either." End quote. Koldruff and others were addressing the distressing reality that children in many jurisdictions are masked on the streets and in classrooms despite presenting nearly zero risk of severe outcomes from COVID-19 and in the face of substantial evidence that children do not often spread the disease. So let's scroll down here. The existing scientific evidence challenged the safety and efficacy of wearing face masks as a intervention for COVID-19. The data suggests that both medical and non-medical face masks are ineffective to block human-to-human transmission of viral and infectious disease such as SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. Supporting against the usage of face masks, wearing face masks has been demonstrated to have substantial adverse psychological and physiological effects, these including hypixia, hypercapnia, shortness of breath, increased acidity, and toxicity, activation of fear and stress response, rise in stress hormones, immunosuppression, fatigue, headaches, decline of cognitive performance, predisposition for viral infectious illness, chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. So, sorry, I messed up so much there, but the acidity, I wonder if that's like heartburn. Because when I was wearing the face masks, I would constantly complain about heartburn. And and once I stopped wearing the face mask, my diet didn't change. I changed up my diet, but I still kept my same diet after wearing the face mask. And I would still get heartburn when I was wearing the face mask, but when I stopped wearing the face mask, my heartburn went away. I wonder if that's what that is right there. Or if I just said the word wrong. Anyways, long-term consequences of wearing face masks can cause health deterioration, developing and progression of chronic diseases and premature death. Governments, policymakers, and health organizations should utilize proper and scientific evidence-based approach with respect to wearing face masks when the latter is considered as prevention intervention for public health. So that was last year, right? So what changed with vaccines? Well, nothing. If you did your research, you would have known that it is impossible to create a vaccine for a coronavirus. The reason? Well, if you believe in the narrative that it came from a bat and not a lab, the truth was staring you in the face. So, let's bring up this article right here. Animal reservoirs of COVID-19 may trigger new rounds of human disease. Yeah. No, since the virus originated in an animal and mutated to infect humans, that means humans get COVID and then pass it back to animals. So by the time we have a vaccine for that strain, it has already mutated and in the animal host and is now spreading again within human hosts. Rinse and repeats. And if we look back at this article, they found the beta, delta, and gamma variants in the sewers of New York City. And that's probably because rats were catching COVID from the sewer waters and then it mutated inside the rats. This information was out there and people were trying to talk about it, but YouTube blocked anyone who went against the established narrative. Now, you might be wondering, why now? Why slowly change the narrative now? Well, election season is here and Institutions like the CDC are starting to put out information that goes against the narrative. You know, and things like this are happening to people who pushed the original COVID narrative. I'm a doctor. Here's why my kids won't wear masks at this school year. Scroll down here. And that's by Lena Wen. For the first year of the coronavirus pandemic, my family and I were extremely cautious. I gave birth in April of 2020, shortly after the COVID-19 hit. To protect the baby, my husband and I pulled our then 2-year-old son out of preschool. We socialized outdoors only, at a safe distance from others. I limited indoor activities to work and grocery shopping, and I was never without my N95. Well, she was very lucky to have an N95. Those were very popular during that time, right? So, what changed that her children will now attend school without a mask? Well, let's scroll down here because she says it. Masking has harmed our son's language development, and limiting both kids' extracurriculars and social interactions would negatively affect their childhood and hinder my and my husband's ability to work. Oh, okay. So now it's negatively affecting you, and you're starting to see it in your kids. So no, masks are not good, right? And this is the same person that said this last year.
Back in May, when they lifted the indoor mask requirement, I thought that the honor code was never going to work, that when vaccinated and unvaccinated people are mixing, unless there is proof of vaccination, everybody should still be wearing masks. And so I actually support what the CDC is now doing, which is going back to this indoor mask requirement, because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated, that they have been walking around without masks. And in fact, that's what led to the surge that we're seeing.
It's the pandemic of the unvaccinated. Remember that? Remember when they were demonizing everybody who didn't want to get vaccinated? It's their fault. It's the reason why our economy is so bad, is because the unvaccinated won't get vaccinated. You know? Like, Jesus. So the narrative is starting to change, obviously. The negative outcomes of masks is now getting a light shined on it by prominent doctors who pushed mask mandates. Also, we are starting to see the negative outcomes of lockdown starting to surface. Now, we felt it in the economy, but institutions like Johns Hopkins are starting to blow the whistle. And here's a article written by the New York Post. Ill effects of lockdowns are far greater than any benefits. Let's scroll down here. A new study from Johns Hopkins University Institute for Applied Economics supports what I and others have long maintained. Lockdowns do not work, and their economic, social, educational, and psychological costs far outweigh any health benefits they might bring. Jesus. Earlier in the pandemic, epidemiological modelers predicted catastrophic casualties that could be averted only with stringent lockdown measures. In response, nearly every country around the world imposed lockdown measures by the end of March 2020, yet little evidence existed to support such actions, and modeling studies were fatally flawed. Now, the Hopkins Literature Review and Meta-Analysis by Professors Jonas Herby, Lars Jungen, and Steve Hank finds that lockdowns, quote, defined as the imposition of at least one compulsory non-pharmaceutical intervention, such as school and businesses closures and limitations on movement and travel, had little to no effect on COVID-19 mortality. All right, there we go. Johns Hopkins is coming out and saying it. Now, you would think with now hearing this about lockdowns that the media and the American people would be at Fauci's throats, demanding that Fauci be investigated for his malicious instructions for the prevention of the spread. But no. You want to know why? Because it's not Fauci's fault. He never said to lock down the country. And that's what he's saying.
Same time, there were authorities that made different decisions than the CDC's recommendations, for example, on school closures, and they did not see higher levels of child mortality when it comes to COVID. And meanwhile, the schools that did close down were now seeing just disastrous levels of learning loss among poor children, children of color, mental health crisis. I wonder if you would recommend locking down schools if you had to do it all over again.
Well, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency that uses their epidemiologists and their science-based approach to make recommendations. Clearly, whenever you close schools, there are collateral effects that are negative. I have always been well aware of that. And I have always felt, and you go back and look at my statements, that we need to do everything we can to keep the schools open and safe. And by safe...
Oh, really? Okay. Are you sure about that, Fauci? Are you sure? Because I seem to remember Fauci saying something different. No, and thanks to Justin Hart, we can be reminded that Fauci is lying through his teeth. Unbelievable. Does Fauci not know that the internet lives forever? Here are the receipts. Let's give this a watch here.
Do you regret particularly the last one, the shutdown, the sweeping shutdown that some said made things worse?
No, I don't, Neil. And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything.
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down a country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier. There are those who say you shut down, you destructive things.
Exactly. I think we got the gist of that. We don't need to watch anymore. He said it all. No, I'm starting to think these old bureaucrats don't understand that everything they say can be brought up by an extensive Google search. And when I say extensive, I mean extensive. Because those clips that I'm showing you, you can't find them by just typing it into Google or Twitter. You would have to do an advanced search by date. So, who is to blame for the authoritarian onslaught that resulted in all of the side effects we are now experiencing as a result of the pandemic? Is it the medical experts like Fauci? Or is it the Biden administration that gave these people a platform and listened to their advice on how to govern during the pandemic? Well, according to the Democrats, they can't be blamed, and neither can Fauci and the medical experts. The person to blame is Trump. House panel: Trump sought to pressure FDA on COVID vaccine treatments. It's happening, guys. The narrative change is coming. All the adverse effects with the vaccine, they're going to blame it on Trump, even though it wasn't him who forced people to get vaccinated. It wasn't the Trump administration who pushed the vaccine. No, and look at this, even Politico is coming out and saying it. Trump White House exerted pressure on the FDA for COVID-19 emergency use authorization, House report finds. The report by House Democrats examining the pandemic says Trump officials sought vaccine approvals to sway voters before the 2020 election. Oh, fucking beautiful, huh? It's just beautiful, dude. Let's go down here. The Trump administration pressured the FDA and Drug Administration, including the former FDA Commissioner, Stephen Hahn, to authorize unproven treatments for COVID-19 and the first COVID-19 vaccines on an accelerated timeline, according to the report released Wednesday by Democrats on the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus crisis. What in the actual fuck, dude? No, when Dems took over, all they could say was how it was a miracle of science that we could produce a vaccine so fast. Now, and CNN even wrote COVID vaccines are a modern miracle. We might not have them without these protections. Let's go down here. The spread which vaccines for COVID-19 have been developed at their effectiveness and stemming the pandemic are nothing short of a modern miracle. While society will marvel at the science behind these vaccines for the years to come. Why does it look like nobody's marveling anymore? They're blaming Trump. Now, what happened to that? Right? The vaccine was such a miracle that we tried to mandate it. No, if you worked in a government or medical job, you had to get it. No, and Biden even tried to bully private sector employees to do the same. No, Major League Sports were even bowing to this, as Aaron Rodgers explained in an interview with Joe Rogan. So let's give that a watch.
This one I knew that my appeal was definitely not going to happen, was they said it's not possible for a vaccinated person, to contract or transmit COVID if they've been vaccinated. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Because I showed up and 5 people, non-players, 5 people fully vaxxed are out with COVID. So what are you talking about? And he said, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, boy.
And I said, no, I just think I'm a realist. I'm just looking at the facts here. Like
and what,
you just
what
told
point
me,
in the pandemic was this?
This was like beginning of August, 2021.
So by then, they had already known that breakthrough infections were real.
There's a whole other situation that was going on that, also was going on in the rest of society, is that my non-vax teammates who were on the bubble, right? So 53 guys make the active roster, 16 on the practice squad. So that's 69 guys on the squad. There's 90 in camp, right? So of the, I said 7, I think it was about 10 guys not vaxxed. Only a few of us were guaranteed roster spots, like we were going to be on the team. And there's a lot of bubble guys. The general managers, and there was talk around the league how general managers were not going to keep bubble non-vax players, right? So they were already up against it. Not only did non-vax players have a harder chance of making the squad, but they also had an almost 0% opportunity to get a workout afterwards. So if you get cut, right, and the season starts, every Tuesday during the football season, most teams will bring in anywhere from 5 to 15 guys for workouts just to see who's out there. Is there any players they can add to the roster? So if you weren't vaxxed, you had a very low percentage, not just of keeping a job, but even getting a job opportunity, like a workout,
Really?
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And so after this conversation with the league, I knew that my appeal was going away, and they were doing this, I called it a witch hunt, where they were asking every single player, are you vaccinated? They were asking a bunch of big quarterbacks, and some guys were saying, it's personal or whatever, didn't want to talk about their status. And that almost guaranteed you weren't vaccinated, right?
All of it was bad. All of it was bad. And all of it is a lesson for people in the future that if something else happens again, to be more skeptical and to understand the influences that are behind these decisions that politicians and even, quote unquote, health experts make. They're being influenced by things other than just data. And that's very important for people to understand, that there's an enormous amount of money that's being spread around here, and people have gotten obscenely wealthy because of this pandemic, and they've done so because they promoted a very specific narrative that they knew was going to be profitable for them, even if it was detrimental for people, even if it removed people's ability to choose what to do and not to do, even if there was people that would not be adversely affected by that virus statistically because of their health, their age. They didn't give a fuck. You want to play football? Take this fucking thing. And I want you to do it publicly so that I can get more money out of those other people that are thinking about it and they're on the fence.
Yeah, and then we're going to virtue signal to say, look how righteous our league is. We have 95% compliance with the vaccine.
Compliance.
And if you don't, we're going to send a stooge to your team to show you graphs.
Yeah, this is insane right here.
Your vaccination percentage of your team compared to the rest of the league, which actually happened.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the stooge like?
Oh, I mopped the floor with them.
Did you?
Yeah. See, again, that's why people are like, no one knew your vaccination status. You lied to your teammates. No. Day 3 of training camp, they sent this stooge in, and he showed these slides about what your vaccination percentage was in your team, where you compare to the rest of the league. And I started asking him questions about liability. Oh, I'm not a lawyer. Okay, cool. But you're in here talking about all these different things, and you don't talk about anybody's personal health issues. There's 0 exemptions. You took out religious exemptions. You took out PEG exemptions. You took out anybody's ability to have an opinion. No, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only going to affect your day-to-day status on the team, but your ability to get a job, your ability to keep a job, your ability to get a tryout if you get cut from this team. Because you want to put a percentage above 90% of your team where you guys can have some sort of like special virtue. Like, look how amazing we are. We're above the 90% threshold here.
And then
they scared teams and said, if you had an outbreak caused by a non-vaccinated player, you not only forfeit that game if you had enough players out, but you wouldn't get paid for that week.
Wow.
And here I am showing up to training camp the first day, and we got 5 people who work for the organization out with COVID, all fully vaxxed. And I got COVID from a fully vaxxed individual who only got vaxxed to keep his potential of being a part of the NFL.
Wow. Wow, dude. The NFL was bribing their players with paychecks. If you don't get vaxxed, then you will not get paid, but you will keep your teammates from getting paid as well. That's fucking dirty, dude. That's super dirty. But hey, remember, it's Trump's fault. No, Trump has not been in office since January of 2021, but pedo Hitler can't be blamed for Trump's wrongdoings. And this ends the big lead.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media
simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.